Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here this evening. I'm Katie Fenn, and I'm going to be talking about web security fundamental techniques and ways to protect yourself against the most common attacks on websites. So first of all, please tell me what you think. I am Katie_Fenn on Twitter. That's not really high up and not really visible. Katie_Fenn on Twitter. Please tell me what you think about my talk. Also, content warnings, just in case large animations on a big screen make you feel sick or uncomfortable. Content warnings will appear in the bottom right-hand portion of my slides on the slide before they occur. So I'm Katie. I work at a small startup called NPM. I live in Sheffield. Not in the Bay Area. So, and I don't commute there either. That'd be like a 9-10 hour commute, so working from home in Sheffield. Come and find me for a sticker. I've got a very limited set of NPM stickers afterwards. I don't think I've got quite enough to go around, but please come and say hello. I also volunteer at a bunch of events, most recently Frontend Sheffield, Scotland JS, and Yorkshire PHP as well. So I came to the web through Fandom, and my fandom was Final Fantasy VII. And fans meet other fans using web forums like this, where you can discuss all your favourite topics, your favourite characters, whether certain characters are resurrectable or not. And if you've played Final Fantasy VII, you'll know what I mean. And in forums, post signatures like these used to be a very common sight. We used them to share and show off our fandom, and they were a way of creatively expressing yourself. To many, they're an introduction to web design and development, because to add these to your posts, you had to write HTML, and that's how I discovered HTML. It's also an introduction to me to start messing with other people's websites. And the first thing that I discovered was HTML bombs. This was accidental at first when people mismatched the HTML closing tags by accident. But then people started using it maliciously to make content explode off the side of the screen or make it completely unreadable altogether. This is caused by writing code that trusts anything that the user sends you, which is also known as bad input validation. So there was once a forum like for Final Fantasy VII, but for a different game called Animal Crossing. If you've not played Animal Crossing before, it's about an idyllic town full of inhabitants who cooperate peacefully with each other. And this forum had a page that allowed users to edit their profile. So if you wanted to change your username or change your password or your email address, you could use this form. Now, one user one day noticed that this form had a hidden user ID field, and it instructed the back end which user was being edited. So he thought, what happens if I save the source of this, edit it using a text editor, and instead change the user ID to 1, the owner of the forum? He discovered that he could actually change the user profile of the owner of the forum. Needless to say, the forum for this wonderfully pleasant game descended into utter anarchy for days until it was fixed. There aren't any rules for web development, for writing software on the web, but if there was one rule, I'd make the first one this one: never ever trust user input. Always ask yourself how even the nicest people playing the nicest game in the universe will misuse your code for fun and profit, because they will. So how can you help protect yourself against input validation? Bad input validation. You can use a library like Joy to validate data on the back end. That's an NPM package. And make sure that the data that you receive from the user is exactly what it seems, that it's the right type of data, and it's the right length, and it's exactly what you expect it to be. Validate a user's actions against their identity by writing an access control list. This defines what actions a user can take and on whose data they can take it on. For example, it shouldn't be possible for a newly registered user to edit the profile of the forum's owner, as an example. And also, never rely on client-side validation alone. Client-side validation written in JavaScript is a convenience to the user and nothing more. It's not a security measure. Any data sent to your server from outside its network can be suspect or suspicious. So many forums on the early web allowed you to log in using a login form like this. This saved you from proving your credentials every time that you made a new post to the forum. And I know this is a very, very common site now, but there was a time before these things existed. Many of these forums were vulnerable to an attack where you could use this one neat password to log you in to any account that you wanted. So this attack allows users to run their own database queries on your site, which is otherwise known as SQL injection. So when you fill out a username and a password in the login form, those credentials are filled into an SQL database query, which you can see on the right. SQL is a popular language for querying databases, and this example checks users matching a username and password, and as long as the database finds any matching users, more than 0 matching users, it grants permission to log in. So let's see what happens to that query when we submit that one weird password. The database has interpreted it as regular SQL, which has a consequence that we didn't expect. This part of the query says, give me all the users that have the username admin. And this part of the query says, or 1 equals 1, which is like saying or true. This makes the query match every single user in the database. But as long as the software is checking for more than 0 users matched, then it will grant access to log in. This is essentially saying to the database, give me all the users with the username admin, or whatever you got, I guess, I'm not fussy. SQL injection hands the keys to your database to the end user, and it allows attackers extraordinary access to recover sensitive information such as passwords, birthdays, credit card numbers, insert their own content such as scripts into your site, to delete data, and give themselves complete control of your site. If you've seen the Bobby Tables XKCD cartoon, this is SQL injection. Another example, attempts to avoid speeding tickets by dropping the database of presumably the DVLA. Don't do this, it will get you into trouble. So one famous example of SQL injection was Drupalgeddon. Quite a few people in the audience will probably heard of Drupal. It's a very popular content management system. And Drupalgeddon affected every Drupal 7 site underneath that version number there, which is a lot of websites. It allowed complete remote code execution, which is another way of saying it's full control over the website for someone else. There's also some evidence that attackers patched the original exploit after breaching sites to prevent that breach from being discovered. So if you used one of the handy tools that the Drupal community developed to tell people whether they were vulnerable to this, it would say, no, you're fine, no need to worry. Meanwhile, they were gathering data having exploited these Drupal websites. So how can you help protect yourself against SQL injection? Never build SQL queries using string concatenation. Instead, use parameterized queries using a tool like PDO, which is a PHP language feature, or Connects, which is an NPM package. Also use object relational mapping tool. Essentially get help from experienced tool maintainers. This is a very, very difficult problem to solve if you're setting out on your own to do it. So a quick bonus story. I used to play a game called World of Warcraft. And in World of Warcraft, you could join together with lots and lots of other people, hundreds of other people, and take down really big bosses. There was one boss in particular that instead of being in a dungeon, it was just wandering around the overworld. And someone found that by shooting a fireball and running away, run away, they could tow it all the way across the continent to a capital city. So this is Lord Kazakh walking around the capital city of Stormwind. Lord Kazakh, whenever he kills a player, he regenerates his HP, his health, and his maximum health increases. With lots of low-level characters, look at how many dead bodies there are. Oh my god. With lots of low-level characters wandering around this capital city, which is very early in the game, for a couple of hours, he essentially became immortal. And Blizzard, the makers of the game, had to roll back all the services in order to fix the amount of damage done. This is a really good example of how you don't need to breach a website in order to wreak havoc. Another story about my time on Final Fantasy forums. What happened was I was just browsing the site, just reading my favourite topics and occasionally arguing. That happens on the internet sometimes. And what happened was I was just suddenly logged out. I didn't log out. I didn't hit the log out button. So what happened? And it wasn't happening to just me. It was happening to everyone else as well. So I thought, what's going on here? We managed to track it down to this one user who had a broken image as their avatar. And we thought, what's going on here? So we looked at the source, and it turns out that they'd set the avatar to logout.php. This is an absolutely true story. This attack gets the other users to do your dirty work for you, which is otherwise known as Crosssite request forgery, or CSRF for short. Crosssite request forgery was successfully exploited on the Netflix website a while ago. This is not the Netflix that we have today. This is the Netflix that posted you DVDs through the post so that you could watch them at home. This attack was possible without even injecting content into Netflix. In fact, you could host the attack on your own website and then just convince Netflix users to go and visit your site. And we know that's easy to do. We know it's really easy to misrepresent content on the internet, because how many times have we seen this happen? So what if you could convince people to visit your site? And what if those people were logged into Netflix, where you could put a broken image down the bottom and no one would think about it, and you could set the URL to this back in the day. Now this URL adds a certain film to your queue in Netflix. Sprinkle in a few more URLs to change the account name and to change the shipping address, and you could ship yourself free DVDs courtesy of whoever looked at your site. This was totally possible. So Crosssite request forgery exploits the trust between users' exploits the trust that websites place in users' browsers. Why shouldn't Netflix trust these requests? They come from legitimate users with real user accounts. The users have the right cookies and they are logged in. The problem stems from trusting user sessions on their own. So how can you help prevent cross-site request forgery? Verify the origin and referrer headers in HTTP requests to confirm they actually come from your sites. These can't be set programmatically in browsers. These can be forged in other sorts of attacks, so we can't always trust these headers, but they can help reduce the surface area for your attack with cross-site request forgery attacks. You can also use synchronizer tokens, or CSRF tokens, to verify that requests have come from a real form on your website. And these tokens are long, unpredictable, unique data that's been generated on your server. We put them inside input fields inside a form just like this. And it's submitted with form requests to your website. You then are able to deny requests that don't contain a legitimate token that's been generated for that user. Because these aren't stored in cookies, they can't be sent in the CSRF attack. You can also use cookie-to-header tokens, which are very similar. This relies on JavaScript's same origin protocol. JavaScript can only set HTTP headers for the sites of the same origin that it's hosted on, so that can help protect against CSRF attacks. And this is no defense if your site has been compromised in other ways, such as cross-site scripting, which we are going to look at next. How upset would you be if I changed the slide now? Let's talk about BB code. BB code was a special language that allowed you to format your text on forums and insert GIFs and silly things like that. And it was intended as a replacement, a drop-in replacement for HTML. And the idea was that this neatly sidestepped the risk of validating HTML. HTML is a very, very complex, huge language with a huge specification, so it was thought by having a cut-down language like BB code, it would make validating it easier. You could use this to insert your favorite GIFs on the web, because this was our idea of fun about 15 years ago. So one day, one of my friends, who shall remain nameless, found that by mismatching the opening and closing tags in the middle there, you could do some weird stuff. So mismatching tags turned out that it confused the BB code transcoder, and you could use it to insert broken HTML into the page. From there, they were able to insert arbitrary code into their posts, such as an onload property that could contain JavaScript, and then run arbitrary JavaScript like an alert function. He used this to repeatedly spam the forum of a rival online game clan during an online match, with their opponents distracted with their forums slowly filling up with garbage. They actually won the match. This attack allows someone else to run their code on your website, which is also known as cross-site scripting. This is Samy Kamkar. In 2005, he became famous for having friends, lots and lots and lots of friends. And he did this by writing a worm, which is a self-replicating script. Like lots of other people in 2005, Samy had a MySpace page, and MySpace was a kind of limited social network by today's standards at the time. You could customize your headline and just put in the text in there, but it was limited by the amount of formatting you could put in. It also had a photo gallery, which allowed you to put up 12 photos. And if you wanted to put up more photos, you had to take photos down again. Samy also discovered that some tags, like div and image tags, were allowed, but script was filtered. MySpace wasn't about to let you run arbitrary JavaScript on its site. So MySpace stripped the script tag, but some browsers executed JavaScript in style tags. It's like the browser was saying, okay, what do you want to set the background of this div as? And you say JavaScript, and it says, okay, I'm going to run that. So MySpace stripped the word JavaScript, thwarting injection into MySpace pages. But it turns out that if you inserted a line break into the word JavaScript, the browsers would just shrug and execute it anyway, and MySpace wouldn't even notice. It would look at that and say, yeah, that's not JavaScript, completely carry on running it. So that's how Samy got JavaScript into MySpace in the first place. Now he tried to write a script that would self-replicate across other people's MySpace pages. So he wrote a script that would install itself on the profile page of whoever looked at it. So you could find new friends by inspecting the page's source code. To do this, normally you'd need to use the body.innerHTML JavaScript property. But MySpace filtered this word too. They were clearly prepared for people like Samy coming. This isn't a problem if you concatenate a string and evaluate it with using the eval function. There's a good reason why developers call eval evil. It makes obfuscating code like this very easy indeed. This trick also works on XML HTTP request on ready state change, which is otherwise known as AJAX. This allowed Samy to make HTTP requests to the MySpace API in order to send friend requests. So he's got the data of friends now. Now he needs to send an API call in order to add friends. Samy found that MySpace's API worked on a different subdomain. So the same origin protocol and browsers prevented him from sending requests to this other subdomain. But he discovered that he could actually view profile pages on that API subdomain. So he just wrote some code that redirects the browser, and then his script continued working, and it just didn't stop it. So this is the complete code. There's a few more tricks that Samy used, but I've shown you the most interesting ones. He added this to his profile headline, and then he waited. 1 hour later, he had one new friend request, and it's working, it's starting to work. 7 hours later, he had 221 new friend requests, and it's starting to take off. 1 hour later, that number has doubled to more than 480. This number is growing exponentially now. The reason that is because every person that Samy recruits all of their friends as well, and that number grows faster and faster and faster. 8 hours later, Samy has 900,000 friend requests, and it's growing so fast now that refreshing this page every minute visibly adds more and more and more friends. This is the actual screenshot that he took showing 900,000 friend requests. 1 hour later, MySpace collapses under the load of requests to become Samy's friend. MySpace was eventually recovered and patched the vulnerability 2 hours later. Samy was raided by the US Secret Service. He was sentenced to 90 days community service. He was only allowed the use of one computer, and it wasn't allowed to connect to the internet. And he was ordered to pay over $15,000 restitution to MySpace. Crosssite scripting allows users to inject their code into your site. It's very dangerous. And some people believe that content injection is a better name for cross-site scripting because it's not only JavaScript, inserting JavaScript into other people's websites that is dangerous. Inserting images, inserting CSS, inserting any media that you control is potentially dangerous. So how can you help protect yourself against cross-site scripting? You can sanitize user input on entry using a library such as sanitize HTML. Don't be tempted to roll your own. MySpace tried to do this. They were clearly prepared. They were not prepared enough. Again, it's really, really difficult. Look at the... yeah, I've already said that. So, you can also use an auto-escaping template library like React or Angular. They will escape content being put into your site so that it can't execute. They won't save you on their own, but they are very convenient to use. A very skilled programmer will be able to look at the source code of your website, figure out that React is running, and will be able to find the underlying API calls and work around them that way. But they are very convenient to use. You can also implement a content security policy which restricts the domains that content can be securely loaded from. Loading content from third-party websites is very, very high risk. So make sure you use a content security policy and lock down the domains that content can be loaded from, down to only the people that you trust. Finally, you can use sub-resource integrity. The integrity property on a script or on a link tag allows you to insert a hash, which is like a really, really long sequence of characters that's a fingerprint of the resource that you're loading. Now, if the file changes and someone inserts their own script in there, then that fingerprint will also change as well. Browsers are able to detect when that fingerprint and the resource don't match, and it can refuse to load that content. Yeah, that's another way that you can help protect against cross-site scripting. In 1999, the web was like a Wild West frontier. Newly discovered attacks like the ones I've been talking about could potentially work on thousands of websites. New things were discovered every day that were just very, very difficult to protect yourself from. This is the picture that we still conjure about web security. And the truth is, in some ways, it's more difficult because the stakes are higher now. This is not people just talking about their favorite characters on a web forum. This is people's credit card data. It's their healthcare data. It's their personal secrets. The stakes are really, really high. But I think that there's never been a better time to learn. There's more resources and tools available now to help you write secure code. Try not to think of the web as a Wild West. Try to think it more like an adventure playground. If you're curious, security need not be hard to learn, and it can be fun and really interesting to find out about the devious ways that people try to get into your website. It's an important topic, but there's never been a better time to learn. Everyone has to start somewhere, and that's where I started. So, special thanks to a number of people who contributed stories to this talk. In order to make it happen, names have been changed in places to protect the innocent and the guilty. Also, I have a very limited number of NPM stickers. I only have a very few Scotland JS stickers left, but if you just want an NPM sticker, might have enough for everyone. We'll see if you're lucky. Come up and say hello afterwards. Thank you very much.